Hello everyone, my name's Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight we're discussing Howard Hawks' The Thing from Another World from 1951 and John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. Two science fiction horror films that, despite sharing a source in John W. Campbell's novella Who Goes There, reflect very different eras in filmmaking and cultural anxiety, and yet both represent landmark moments in genre cinema. The 1951 The Thing from Another World, directed by Christian Nyby with producer Howard Hawks leaning heavily over his shoulder, is emblematic of Cold War science fiction. Its screenplay by Charles Lederer and an uncredited Ben Hecht significantly adapts Campbell's story, transforming it into a brisk, dialogue-driven ensemble piece. The alien is a humanoid, plant-based creature, played by future Gunsmoke star James Arness, that represents the fear of external invasion and ideological contamination prevalent in early 1950s America. The film emphasizes group cooperation, military efficiency, and rational science as defenses against the unknown. Its fast-paced dialogue helped establish a template for sci-fi horror that balanced suspense with optimism in human ingenuity. John Carpenter's The Thing, by contrast, reflects a far bleaker worldview. The screenplay by Bill Lancaster returns more faithfully to Campbell's original concept of a shape-shifting alien menace, emphasizing uncertainty and mistrust. Carpenter's film centers on paranoia rather than invasion, with the alien's ability to perfectly imitate its victims, turning the threat inward, eroding trust among the characters. The groundbreaking practical effects by Bottin redefined on-screen monster movies, pushing the boundaries of what mainstream audiences could imagine or endure. Ennio Morricone's minimalistic musical score, with noteworthy contributions by Carpenter, uses pulsing, repetitive motifs to create a sense of relentless, inescapable tension. Unlike its 1951 predecessor, which was immediately hailed as an artistic and commercial success, 1982's The Thing was initially reviled by critics and commercially unsuccessful. Thankfully, it has since been reappraised as a masterpiece in the 40-plus years since its release. Collectively, these two things demonstrate the genre's evolution from externalized fears to psychological and existential dread and everything in between. They show how the same story can be reshaped to reflect changing social anxieties, cementing the things as cornerstones of science fiction horror history. I've got a few things I'd like to discuss. Two amazing classic films, 1951's The Thing from Another World, celebrating its 75th anniversary, and the 1982 John Carpenter follow-up called just The Thing. And we have an incredible panel to chat about both of these monster masterpieces. Let's bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Fraser Coffeen.
Hi there, glad to be here.
Chris Hainsworth.
Thanks for having me.
Ryan Olson.
Hi, all.
Katie McLean Hainsworth.
Hello, I've been waiting for this my whole life.
And rounding out our circle, Kevin Matthews.
Hi, happy to be here.
And we're going to be chatting about The Thing from Another World, 1951, celebrating its 75th anniversary. And also John Carpenter's The Thing, 1982. And we'll also spill a few words about The Thing prequel from 2011. I don't know how kind those words will be, but we'll find out. And we're going to be talking spoilers all night long because we love these movies and you've all seen them already. So just join in the fun. Thanks for coming on the show and welcome. It was the 75th anniversary of The Thing from Another World. And I was like, well, we should absolutely do a show about that. But there was no way we couldn't also talk about John Carpenter's remake, which isn't really a remake. I do want to just kind of clarify that it is more just another version of this story, and certainly one that's closer to the source material, John W. Campbell's short story or novella, Who Goes There? Fraser, which movie did you come to for the first time?
I knew the Carpenter one first. From sort of seeing it at home, I was certainly way too young to be watching it at whatever age I watched it. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I was probably, we had it on a VHS at home and I was left to my own devices to watch whatever I wanted on those VHS tapes. That one looked interesting to me. So I remember sort of, popping it in and seeing it. I was probably 10, something like that, and being like, oh boy, this is Boy, there's a lot going on here. The other one I certainly was aware of because my dad was a really big like classic sci-fi fan. So we watched a lot of like old Them and Invaders from Mars and a lot of those kinds of classics together. So I definitely saw that one. But I do think that oddly enough, even though that's the case, that I did see The Carpenter first and then kind of doubled back. And I didn't even quite place that they were necessarily the same thing for a little while. I was 10. What can you do?
Chris, how about you? Which one did you come to first?
I came to John Carpenter's The Thing first. In fact, it was sort of a watershed horror movie. When I was 4, I watched Carnival of Souls, which messed me up so badly that I didn't watch any horror movies or sleep with the lights off for the next 8 years. So my neighbor, I can name him now because he's passed away, sadly, so he's out of any legal problem for this, but constantly was getting bootleg VHS videotapes. John Carpenter's The Thing was one of them. We were just over there one day and he popped it in. Somebody surreptitiously video recording from from a projection booth or in the audience. So like the year it came out, 3 weeks after the film opened, he had a bootleg copy of it. After having rejected horror movies for so long, to watch that and be like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And apparently I like horror movies now. So that was my reintroduction to horror, my introduction to that film. Honestly, the first time I watched Thing from Another World was last week in its entirety.
Wow.
I had familiarity mostly from the clips that I had seen in John Carpenter's Halloween, which is one of the movies they're watching while she's babysitting. And of course, I was aware that James Arness was from Gunsmoke was the creature. And, I had seen clips in there here and there. But the first time sitting it beginning to end was last week.
Cool. Well, and I'll also just take this moment to say, Chris, when I started this show, Chris went, well, so when are you doing The Thing? I know you've been waiting for 150 episodes or so to talk about this one. So excited to have you.
And I also know that the competition to be on this panel was tight. So I figured the bribe that I actually screened it for you at the big screen several years ago may have put me over the edge. So I'm happy for that.
I mean, the fact that you earmarked it before I even knew I was going to be talking about it also helped. Ryan, thanks for joining us. Which one did you come to first?
I saw the 51 film first.
Okay.
My dad has always been a massive science fiction fan. I mean, his all-time favorite movie is Forbidden Planet. And The Day the Earth Stood Still, War of the Worlds. I mean, I love those movies. And The Thing was another one of those. I saw it pretty early on as a kid. And I remember liking it and thinking that it was cool. The only thing that bugged me was, that the creature's a plant. I just didn't find that scary. So to me, I always kind of was like, he's a plant. How scary can that be? I mean, I've always respected it, obviously, for its time. I saw that one first. My dad rented the new film. I believe he went and saw it with my uncle in the theater and then ended up renting it. And I saw it in the 80s. I don't remember exactly my age, but I do remember just absolutely being floored and blown away. A life-changing experience. I mean, it's in my top 5 all-time favorite horror movies. And when I first saw it as a kid, though, I hated the ending. I didn't like that it didn't resolve, basically. But obviously, I've completely changed focus on that over the years since. But yeah, it's a masterpiece.
Katie.
My story is a combination of Fraser's and Chris's. I saw it when I was 12. I saw the Carpenter movie first when I was 12 because it was on TV all the time. And I saw the 1951 version last week. When I think about watching The Thing, I'm just like, I'm just going to watch the Carpenter one because I love it and I can watch it ceaselessly.
Kevin.
I don't recall what age I was when I first saw The Thing, but I believe it had been on video for a while. I'd seen the cover, and it was the cover with the strange, captivating font I wasn't sure about, and the spider head that I didn't know was quite a spider head. It was John Carpenter's film. I just vividly remember I was brought home. We must have had a long day out, and it was quite late, and I was eating at the kitchen table alone. A chicken curry. This is all detail that adds up. And apparently on TV, they were finally showing The Thing. Now, I say on TV, but this was like a 6-inch square screen. It was a combo TV radio not a TV
Oh.
VCR, a combo TV radio.
It's like you were
with a
in the
wobble
Arctic.
wheel. I watched that. It kind of helped with the dog sequence. I didn't quite know what was going on. I was just weirded out and trying to see everything. And still on that tiny black and white screen, by the time it got to the autopsy scene, I had a fork comically held in my mouth and had given up on trying to eat my dinner. So that was it. I was a fan from then. I had to see it in colour on a proper screen, which actually took quite a while. I think a few years later, eventually saw the original, The Thing, because obviously I knew of its existence once I started to learn about movies and loved The Thing. But I've gone back to Carpenter's like a lot more often, and that is the one for me.
Yep. Being of a certain age, I did grow up with the classic sci-fi stuff playing on TV. And so I was certainly watching Thing from Another World frequently on Saturday afternoon matinees. And as I started reading more horror reference books, I learned kind of its significance. The fact that it came out during that classic year of 1951, when we had The Day the Earth Stood Still, When Worlds Collide, it's like it was an amazing time because it was kind of the dawning of the sci-fi movie as we would come to know it. And whereas The Day the Earth Stood Still had a benevolent alien with a warning, this was a decidedly less benevolent alien. What you were talking about, Ryan, the idea of it being a carrot or a vegetable, that was something that I don't think I even landed with me from the movie itself. It was actually the reference books making sport of it that actually pointed that up in my head. I'm like, oh, I guess he is a vegetable. But the idea that something is acting like a human that is not human, that was what was scary to me. Then later, when the Carpenter film came out, it was something that was completely different. And I find it fascinating that Carpenter holds the Hawks film in such reverence, and yet was like, you know what? I don't need to remake that movie. I need to go back to the source material and tell this story in a way that I can tell it. Because they didn't have the ability to do what Rob Bottin ended up doing. But I think it's kind of fascinating that you have Howard Hawks going to Ben Hecht and Charles Lederer and saying, I want you to adapt this story, and that they come up with this. Because much like, Frankenstein, it's not a great adaptation, but it captures the spirit of the story and manages to tell a story that is engaging and is suspenseful. So it feels like you got what you came for without necessarily getting a proper adaptation. I find that fascinating that, then you come back around to Carpenter's version, you're like, oh, this is so much closer and it hits on a completely different level. It's not about whether you can trust the thing that's coming from outside the door. It's whether you can trust the thing that's within the door with you.
I think the thing that we're going to be saying that a lot.
We're going to be saying the thing a lot. So
yes.
Prepare yourself.
What I appreciate about the Carpenter adaptation, and it's very deliberate, and we watched it again last night with him and Kurt Russell doing the commentary, and that his hook into the story was the paranoia of who can you trust. And you drop in, as opposed to like The Thing from Another World, where it's like there's like 40 people at this base and they're all kind of hanging out in normal clothes, and there are men and women and they go to the cafeteria and they flirt and they do all of these sort of normal things, and then it does become like an outside monster movie as opposed to the closest it comes to that paranoia is the science versus military industrial complex in the first movie. That it's like the scientists are like, no, we have to study this no matter what. And the military is like, no, we should just blow it up. And the movie kind of definitely comes down on the side of the military in that case. But as opposed to the Carpenter one, which is you have all of these guys, and they said it in the commentary last night, all of them are running away from something. They've gone to the most remote part of the world, and it's not like a punishment. They're not in prison. They've all chosen to be here rather than someone else, and they're already sick of each other, and they've been there forever, and now they're getting cut off, and then this happens. and the people who you know so well, you can no longer trust. I appreciate Thing from Another World as a sci-fi monster movie, but as far as where all the horror hits me, it's straight up Carpenter all the time.
It's interesting what you said there, Chris, about the number of people there. In watching all three of them, including the prequel, again, in a short span, I was struck by the fact that only Carpenter understands, and that script understands, like small number of people. Like there's both of the other ones, there's way too many folks,
Well, and to Carpenter, he was frustrated by how many people there still were and the many scenes of them all standing around talking, which he said was the scariest for him to approach filming, and the kind of thing that made Kurt Russell not ever want to direct, because he just didn't know how you handle a bunch of people around a table talking a scene and then another scene of all these people standing around a table talking. And he and Dean Cundey argued over breaking the wall to show all the people in a room. Like sometimes the camera would have to go back behind Wilford Brimley, who was sitting against a wall, in order to show the action of a scene. And John Carpenter was like, fuck it, we're doing that. I can't figure out any other way to do this.
You talk about, Chris, the fact that everybody is there. They only ever refer to each other by their last names. Not a single, we don't know a single person's first name other than we know that MacReady's first initial is R.
And we know Gary.
Well, no, Gary's his last name.
Gary's his last name.
Gary's his last name. That's right.
Yep. So it's like the fact that none of these men have chosen to have any kind of relationship beyond referring to you by your last name. That says something, I think, in and of itself.
Yeah.
And Katie,
you were the same in the story as well. You don't get anybody's first name in Who Goes There either.
I was just going to say, Katie, you were kind enough to kind of alert us to, the online presence of the short story, because I hadn't read it before. And I was really struck by how many of those names get ported over, how many of the situations get ported over. And again, looking at what Hawks and his team did in terms of adapting that material to tell a different kind of story. Because again, the sci-fi monster movie is not a thing yet. They are basically creating a genre. And that's not something that Hawks necessarily was known for. Hawks was kind of a refiner of genre material. And here he is basically at the vanguard of it, creating something that has never been there before.
Fascinating to read that story. And well, the least interesting thing about this is that they can duplicate a human. We're going to cut that from the, it's like, really? Because, okay. Though I did really appreciate the Hawks movie, especially the sort of dry humor present throughout. And I did really love watching the scenes that were clearly that Carpenter fixated on, like the tunnel with the things electrocuted at the end is so very much like the end game of the movie with Blair and everything. And I really appreciated seeing those flashes of inspiration. I felt that it's a very loving tribute to a movie that he was like, I don't want to make that movie, but I really did like it. And here's what I'm going to preserve.
Well, and we also have so many elements that are Howard Hawks, like kind of hallmarks of Howard Hawks, that fast talking, clever dialogue that's nearly overlapping, but it's always out in the open so that you can actually hear and understand what's going on. It's not like an Altman movie where they are talking over one another and you really don't know what's being said. Like that's kind of the joy of listening to a Howard Hawks movie, is that you're going to have great dialogue and you're going to be able to hear all of it. And you're going to have a lot of characters who are saying it.
So I've never seen a Hawks movie before. This was my first one. And I was struck almost immediately by similarities between the way he sets up scenes and multiple people having conversations and like Jurassic Park, people talking in the foreground about what they're having for lunch and people talking in the background about a velociraptor and everything being really clear and flowing. And it was cool to see that influence played out as well.
I hope you dig deeper into Howard Hawks's filmography because there's a lot of great stuff that he did. Just a master of Hollywood, especially early Hollywood. Ryan, what are your thoughts about the original 1951? You said that it doesn't resonate in the same way, but as a classic sci-fi horror fan, what do you like about it?
Well, I mean, when I saw it as a kid, I thought it was interesting, just the whole setting and obviously everything that was going on with what they were trying to do and the idea of there's being something stuck in the ice. And I mean, it always kind of cracked me up revisiting it, the fact that they choose to put the thermite in there and put it right by the ship so they can accidentally blow it up and not, have the foresight to be like, well, maybe we don't want to do it too close to it because we won't want to damage this thing. I mean, it's the find of the century and they nuke it. I mean, it's really kind of funny because that just, always puts together military intelligence, two words combined that can't make sense. I thought that part was interesting. And I mean, I think it's funny how Nicholson, the banter with her, with the captain, and, how they just end up he's tied up and they're having this moment doing all this. It's like, where does this come from? It just comes out of nowhere kind of thing. And I don't know. I thought it was funny. And I like, for that time period too, how strong she is and how, much she's in control. I mean, yes, she does. Obviously the Carrington, exerts his being the one in charge, but it doesn't feel as much like she's being downplayed as a person. Like she seems to have her own strength of character in the part, and she takes control of it, and I really appreciated that. It felt more natural, like in a situation like that, I guess.
And that is a Hawks hallmark, is to have those strong female characters that can match the men at their level. Yes, it's still a very male-dominated movie. The women are present. I don't think they are just there for decoration, as they would later become in later 50s sci-fi movies. Yeah. I think like they are legit characters.
Oh, yeah.
The conflict, as you point out, Chris, is really between the military might and the science, the inquisitiveness versus the defensiveness. A thinly veiled, I think, commentary on the encroachment of the Red Scare. The fact that they moved it from Antarctica, which is where it's set in the story, up to the Arctic Circle is because Russia is right around the corner. And they make comments about that throughout the movie, about how, Russia is right over there. And that's what we're doing here, is so that we can kind of hold this space.
I think the other thing, too, that struck me about that particular aspect of it was the decision to move it up to, like, the thing has just crashed in that movie, which is obviously very different. And I had sort of forgotten that because I'm so used to the Carpenter, right? So I'm locked in with this idea that it's very like Lovecraftian and like, buried under the ice for all these years. But yeah, it just happened, and it is sort of actively in the process of invading, which is, like you said, it's very like sci-fi. It's very, of that genre, but it is very, Red Scare. And like, we're in the process of like fighting off an invasion that is happening right now.
And in the novella, it's 20 million years old.
Right.
Even Carpenter was like, that's too old. We'll make it 100,000 years.
The novella piece is interesting because I assumed, I only just read it for the first time myself as well in the preparation for this. I assumed that the novella was more like the Hawks version.
Me too.
And the Carpenter was the one who,
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's so weird seeing MacReady and Blair and all those names in there, being like, wait, this is so much closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do find it interesting because when you think of other movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which it is a allegory for the Red Scare, and that, it could be anybody, that like you take a short story that, it could be anybody, and let's just cut that part out of it, but have a story about, communist threat. In terms of like the scientists, it does seem to be like a condemnation of the nuclear age, in that, these scientists will just endanger everybody to make a new discovery, that it is this paranoia about like unchecked knowledge and the people who are pursuing it versus the people who are there to keep it safe, who are also coincidentally somewhat incompetent. The fact that they blow up the ship, and they're always trying to get back to the base and like find out what they should do next, and they're like, don't do anything. And he's like, okay, well, we're just going to do what we need to do in order to keep alive.
Well, and it's also, you can't have a military without science. Like it is all about advancements in science that allows people to push forward with their military. Like, we would not have won the war had it not been for Oppenheimer. Like all of these things, I think there's such an uneasy relationship between science and the military. Like they do want it to be cut and dried and let's keep things clean and clear. But that's not what science is about. Science is about curiosity and exploration and making mistakes, being genuinely open to new ideas. And I do like the fact that we kind of have that back and forth. You also get the sense that Carrington is not incompetent. He's not somebody, he's somebody who's well respected. Scotty, the reporter, even comments on like, you've won, every prize known to man, so when you come to me with this wild theory, I'm not going to say you're, stuffed full of wild blueberry muffins, which I love. It's like they don't necessarily trust it, but he is somebody who is held in high regard. They want to trust him, but then he is so interested in the science. He says, science has no enemies. And it's like, yes, that's true, but enemies do different things with science.
Well, one thing that's interesting too, that, how he approaches everything from a more clinical mind, and just like you said, that it has no enemies. But the other thing is that in those kind of movies, you always had that, what they call the learned man, the guy who kind of knew everything. So people would respect that more and kind of defer to him because he is a man of knowledge and deep thought and thinking. So he would be the go-to guy. But obviously, as we've seen, unfortunately, even in reality, how much people have moved away from the respect of knowledge and learning, and, people that invest in that type of stuff, as opposed to, because he keeps talking about it in the movie about how we don't want to destroy this thing. We need to find a way why does it always have to go to, we got to kill it. We got to destroy it. We don't know what it is. And yes, it is a threat. It's, it literally wants their blood as well. Even though it is a plant, it's kind of a vampiric type thing. Their instinct right away is, well, we got to destroy it. We can't let this thing survive. Which is kind of interesting in the fact that, you get other movies like Alien where the complex would be like, no, let's see if we can weaponize it. Let's figure out a way to study it so we can make better ways to kill people,
And what you just said there, we have two archetypes that are being created right before our eyes, in that we have our military hero, and then you have things like Richard Carlson in It Came from Outer Space, who's more of a scientist hero. And we are going to see variations on those two for basically the next, 50, 60, 75 years. We're going to have either somebody who's with the military that we're siding with and we're identifying with as our protagonist, or we're going to have somebody who is more professorial, and we're going to be following them. But really, we're just seeing like the two lines being drawn right now in front of us. It's great.
And I think it's interesting that you're right, there are these two. This movie clearly falls more on the side of the military guy, obviously, right? But, Ryan, I think you're totally right in bringing up Alien. I thought the same thing. He's very much a precursor to, the Weyland-Yutani kind of mindset. But I think it's interesting that at the end of this, they very deliberately go out of their way to say, like, yes, but we forgive him, right? Scotty in his report says that he was injured, and they, the one guy's like, good man, Scotty, which I love. I love that little bit, right? Yeah. And I think it's a really great moment of like, no, we had our qualms here, but we understand that, that he was, trying to do the right thing as well.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're all Americans. We're all on the same side, and we're all coming at it from different directions, but we're all united in what we want.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's an interesting inversion from the novella, which I also read recently, thanks to Katie's good work. But in there, in line with the Carpenter film, it's a scientist who recognizes the full impact of the danger and what they're against. So in that 51 original, watching it again after reading the novella is a slightly lesser experience for me. I've watched it and respect it as a kind of, a keystone sci-fi film, and it's a great sci-fi creature feature. But yeah, they really did, I think, remove the more interesting elements from the novella. The scientist is left to be pursuing the interest of science at what cost? Who knows? The military will keep him safe in the meantime. I think even just cunningly using actors or doubling up some processing for the actors could have had some real good moments of paranoia in there. But they settled for the vampiric carrot, and that's good in its own way. But once you are more familiar with the source material, I do think it is surprising, as you've all said, that they took that and then thought, we'll leave out this, we'll do it this way, and made this, which, I say, stands up on its own legs, but feels far removed from the source material.
That sequence of them setting the room on fire, it's one of those that in lieu of monster effects, we're going to have just like some pretty spectacular moments of drama and action. I had forgotten, like, there's a room on fire at one point. And it's a really incredible sequence. I love the fact that we've got, these characters similar to the Carpenter version. And I just talked about this on a recent show. We talk about how great these characters are and how memorable they are. And I think part of that just comes from the rewatchability of the film. The characters on the page are really not that well drawn. They're kind of just, guys, and they move the plot along. But as we watch them over and over and over again, we see the skill that each one of these actors is bringing to this part. And I think that's where we get this idea that they're like these really well-crafted characters. But the same thing holds true for the Hawks version. And I keep saying Hawks. It should be noted that Christian Nyby is our director of record. He was an editor for Hawks. And there are many stories as to why he was given the helm. From all reports, Hawk was very much on site and hands-on and doing a lot of the directing himself. But we do have some really memorable characters where I was going with that, in that we have, Kenneth Tobey as our captain. We have Nikki, we have Carrington, we have all of the little like ancillary characters that surround Henry, and they're all memorable if you sit down and watch this movie a dozen times. I don't think the Carpenter version is superior in terms of its characterization. In fact, in some ways, I would say that the better dialogue is given to the characters in the Hawks version. As a result, we get to kind of know them a little bit better. But as we've all watched the Carpenter version 40, 50 times, it's hard to say.
I think that the actors in the Carpenter version do a lot with the little they're given, which is a brilliant skill to have as an actor in an ensemble movie like this one. That the very tiny moments of Knowles not turning the music down after Bennings, and this being a moment for Bennings too, claims I got shot today. You know who that guy is, based on how he delivers that line. It's one of his 8 lines of dialogue in the whole movie.
Right.
Yeah, I think they do a lot with a little, and it goes a long way. Of course, none of us are unbiased enough to be able to say whether or not we would remember these characters after a first viewing beyond MacReady, but
I think it was originally meant to be more of an ensemble piece. As the script was developed, it became more and more kind of MacReady's show. Initially, it was going to be just kind of shifting alliances, that way you didn't know who was going to go. As you watch the thing, you know that MacReady's not going to go first or second or even last.
Sure.
He's our hero.
He's also the most recognizable person in the movie.
Absolutely.
By far, I believe, at the time.
I agree with your basic premise, Aaron, that yes, that we have watched, all of us on here have watched the Carpenter so much, right? I do agree with that. But I think the other piece goes back to what I said before about the smaller number, right? So it's easier. And a skill that Carpenter has, not just in this movie, but in a lot of his movies, is like giving everybody something distinct. That guy rides on his roller skates, like Clark has his hat and his beard, and like this guy's bald with the red. Like everybody's got a bit of a different look and a different way of acting and a different way of being, so that like there's never any confusion, right? And
unless they're all outside with coats on.
Unless they're all outside with coats.
But even then, Knowles has a bright white coat and
MacReady's
got a cowboy hat. They still do it.
It's still, the cowboy hat is amazing. Yeah. It's still a little bit, but it is a disadvantage that the 51 one has, that it's like they're in uniforms, and they're like,
they're all pretty close cut.
Yeah. I got the same haircut. They're all kind of the same size, shape, uniform.
It's hard even to tell the women apart.
And again, not to keep up with the, limit our discussion of the prequel, but a similar kind of thing there, where there's just like a whole bunch of just kind of like, I don't know, like Norwegian guys, who don't have a whole lot distinct going on with any of them.
Except the dude from Game of Thrones,
Except for him.
Right.
Although back then,
the guy from
he wasn't the Game of Thrones guy at that point.
That's right.
Yeah. Which I only realized watching it this time. I was like, oh, look at that. Game of Thrones guy.
It's not a 1-to-1, but this bears a lot of, it feels like a haunted house movie, like Alien feels like a haunted house movie. And it's, for me, it's that very, once again, you got blue collar people who've been doing this job for a while. They're kind of all at their limit with each other. They're ending the end of their tour, and this unexpected thing happens. So much like Ripley in Alien, I feel like MacReady emerges de facto is sort of like,
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
somebody who doesn't, all he wants to do is sit in his shack, drink,
Get
and
drunk.
play chess. And I think that's also an interesting analogy. It's like he's playing chess against the computer. He thinks he's won. He doesn't. What's his response? Destroy everything. Which is, it's like, well, I'm gonna destroy this computer too, so nobody else can play it. And then at the end of this movie, he's like, well, we're about to lose. I guess it's time to burn everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so
So-
foreshadowing.
Whereas like Aliens, where Cameron took the basic rules of the alien and built out this other way of attacking that material, it's like, oh, well, what if there are thousands of them? What if we're on a planet? We're isolated, all of these things. But he takes the sandbox and like plays by its rules. I feel like the 2011 prequel tries to replicate John Carpenter's The Thing beat for beat, but also do that Aliens thing of amping up the special effects and the scares and things like that. And it fails because it can't do both. And it also does that annoying thing of, oh, no, this is a direct sequel, and this is that, and this is that, and this is that. See, it's 1-to-1. But at the end, we're going to change it so we blow up the ship rather than accidentally blow up the ship. And it's like
Prometheus all over again.
Yeah, it's like when Katie and I, when we were in California, my aunt was following the GPS, and she'd go from either following it religiously to disregarding it completely. And you'd be like, one or the other. One or the other. Come on.
This is how you
One
get
of
lost.
the things about the 2011 thing that is kind of head scratching is the attention to detail that they had to try to make everything so accurate to what they find at the Norwegian camp in the 82 film. And yet the thing is that you clearly see in the video them blowing up the ice to reveal the ship.
Yeah.
Yet in the 2011 movie, the ship's engines start up, and that's what reveals it and leaves it open there with that. It's the one thing that kind of, is a head scratcher with that.
They really don't know whether they want you to have seen the 1982 film a bunch of times or wish that you had never seen it. They really can't decide.
I can't imagine that. I mean, because it feels like that's the whole point of making this movie is because everybody loves this movie. And I thought it was a really intriguing idea. I'm glad they weren't trying to remake it. I was like, you know what? I'm okay with you telling that story because that story is basically the story from 1951. They go out, they find the thing, they bring it back, and we get to see it all happen. And so I was kind of like, what a wonderful kind of like mixing of the two. I agree. I don't think it succeeds on nearly any level, but I admired the idea, and I didn't mind the fact that they were trying to go, here's how that axe got in the door, and here's how that happened. I'm like, that's half of the fun for me is inventing that, as opposed to Carpenter, who was like, yeah, let's have an axe in the door. That shows that there was a struggle here. It's like, no, we're going to explain how the axe got in the door. So I thought the idea behind 2011 prequel was solid. I just didn't think that the execution was as we could have wanted.
It was the ending, like Ryan said about like, no. They watched the video of them discovering the ship, out like putting the flags, using the thermite, and that's how it blows up. I'm like, you can't do the axe in the door and the guy in the chair with the slit wrists. And it's maybe it doesn't bother anybody else, and I hope it doesn't. But the fact that they changed that so much really kills that movie for me. It's a perfectly fine movie until that point, but that is a deal breaker for me. But the other thing is, it's a perfectly fine movie when you have an actual masterpiece.
Right.
That's why I think Aliens is a masterpiece and Alien is a masterpiece, and they live in the same world, but they take two different paths.
Well, they're almost like the same film. It's just a continuation. You watch Alien and then you see Aliens, and it's like, okay, it's a sequel, but to me, it's a true sequel in that they're not just remaking the first movie again. They forward the story. It moves forward into new territory where you haven't been before. That's
they say what's
what
next.
Makes Aliens work so much. And the Thing prequel, they tried to do that, and I mean, I think that they do for the most part in terms of filling in the gaps and doing all that. It's just the one big gaffe is having the ship reveal at the end like that. I mean, they should have had that in the beginning instead of just falling in the crevasse and then they find the ship down there and they pull the creature out, and all that stuff still happens. It's just kind of, they just leave that one big detail out of there where it's like, well, why would you do that when you're being so focused on trying to get everything right in terms of that? Because they talk about how the director was such a big fan and they watched the movies a million times and did all this stuff just so that they could make sure that they made it as true to it as it is. And it's like they did it all except for that one part where it was like, well, yeah, but they didn't use the thermite to reveal the ship and do all that stuff. I mean, that was kind of wacky, but I mean, to me, a lot of other stuff about the movie was interesting, and I did enjoy parts of it just because I'm such a big fan of the Carpenter movie. Seeing the story to me was cool, and obviously the best part of the movie is literally seeing how it all leads right into the 82 film. I mean, of course, the studio screwed everything up too by taking all the practical effects and just covering up with CGI. I mean, on the special features of the DVD, you see Alec Gillis and Woodruff talking, and you see all the cool props of the creature effects that they're doing. And it's like, I wanted to see that. I still hope to, I know it'll probably never happen, but I would love to see their version of the movie with the special effects as doing them practically, and not just where it's like they say, well, we didn't just use CG to enhance it. No, you didn't. You completely covered it up.
Yeah, that's where I felt like we weren't living in the same world. Woodruff and Gillis did create these incredible animatronic effects so that they could live in the same place as Robotines. And I feel like, there was a sense of, this is a modern audience. They want to see modern effects that are going to be exciting and visceral. In so doing, you're kind of betraying the fans who are coming to see it because they want to see something that exists in that same universe.
I agree. And I think the other thing that, for me at least, that takes away from that same universe feeling is, in my opinion, you will never see a movie that is set 40 years before it's, or 30 years before it's released, that has such disdain and such low effort for trying in any way to make it look period. There is zero effort on the part of the costuming team to make it look like it's the early 80s.
They do use the Men at Work song.
yeah. There's but man, it is,
to ground
you
in 1982.
It looks nothing like the world of it. Weirdly enough, I despite all of these negative things, it's objectively not great, but because the Carpenter is so good, I feel like it does mooch just enough DNA off of the Carpenter one to still be acceptable.
Every time we watch it, I say, okay, I don't ever need to see it again. And then and then we'll prepare to watch the Carpenter one again. It'll be like, let's just watch the 2011
right.
Just to bring us right into it. But it's what I feel for. I agree, Fraser. I think it's objectively not a great movie. There's a lot of things they fall down on. It feels very ill thought out towards the end. Like they had beats they wanted to hit and then didn't know what to do after that. They've got to end it with the helicopter and the dog. But I do love the inclusion of the detail of a thing can't copy metal. I think it was really clever. I don't think it's quite used to the effect that it could be ultimately. At the end, when she torches Joel Edgerton in that vehicle, I'm sitting there going, I didn't realize he even had I missed all the detail leading up to that point, and I'm so glad she did that because I think he's one of the least charismatic actors on the planet, and to put him into the Kurt Russell-esque role is such a disappointment. But I do appreciate that it added that little element, which made seeing the movie on the big screen 3 years ago so fascinating, because only then did we realize that Doc Hopper has a nose ring.
Right.
I actually noticed it the first time when the Blu-ray came out. That was the first time I believe that I noticed that he's got a nose ring. Yeah, that was something that
we never get the chance to see, because he dies before that becomes an issue with the conflict of the 2011 movie. But I do appreciate that detail that was added.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on the 2011 prequel?
I quite enjoyed it. I'm in the minority, probably. Again, I agree it's not great. I think it's quite good at what it's trying to do. It was hampered by that, let's call it a CGI overlay with the practical effects. And I don't mind if people like it or really dislike it. I just get annoyed when people say I hated that thing remake. Like, it's not a remake. I know it hits a lot of the same beats, but it is a prequel. It's not a remake. I know they get licensed to remake certain moments, but it's not. So I think they did themselves a favor there. I may be misremembering. Do let me know. Didn't they advertise a movie as being from that effects team, all practical effects? Was it Harbinger Down?
Harbinger Down was the film they made. That's the film they made afterwards.
Yeah,
kind of in
I know, like,
response
from
to
the practical effects of the thing, no CGI, and that wasn't a great movie.
No, it's not.
For me. That was like, okay, you don't always have a film just built around effects. The thing wasn't just built around effects.
No,
it has all the characters and the great storyline. So that kind of proved that point. So yeah, there's definitely many flaws with it. It was interesting rewatching it now because, like everyone else, I was like, oh, it's a Game of Thrones guy. Oh, it's Eric Christian Olsen from Dumber and Dumber or whatever it was.
I actually watched them in order, or in that when I watched them for preparing for this, I watched the 51 film, the 11 film, and then 82. That was the way I watched it, just because I wanted to see how it worked with that, because I had never done that. And I got to admit, I mean, I didn't hate the 11 film when I saw it in theater. I thought that there is a lot of stuff in it that is fun to enjoy. As such a diehard fan, like I said, I mean, obviously it's vastly inferior to the masterpiece, but for what it is and what it contributes to the 82 movie, I do enjoy it for that overall.
I agree that the metal thing is good. Also have to enjoy the line, is it something like, I'm going to die because I floss? I mean, I like that. That's a fun bit of dialogue to include in that.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they're going to do a blood test and they figure that there's another way that they can, address it.
One of the things that really boosts the Carpenter for me, and it's you notice it immediately at the end of the 2011 when they start going into the Ennio Morricone score as they're chasing the dog, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot how much I missed this music. You know, and how much of a part of that whole, how much it supports what John Carpenter's doing in the 82, just that mournful sort of, it's not like, whereas the thing is like, dun, 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 it's like all this big, or, the Morricone score never goes into that. It is always that kind of like low thrum sort of supporting the paranoia. And the second it kicks in over the credits of the 2011, I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's watch John Carpenter's The Thing. Let's go. Other than the dog actor, I think it is one of John Carpenter's biggest support systems is that score.
Well, the score creates such an oppressive and foreboding atmosphere of doom and gloom from the moment it starts. I mean, from the very beginning, you know that this is just, you're in for, it's not going to be a happy experience, period. And it isn't. It's a very, very grim and bleak and just desolate movie. I mean, not only for the atmosphere of the setting, but just for everything that happens. There's no hope from the first moment.
I also really like that he allowed a third person to come in and do the music for somebody who had traditionally done his own music for so many movies. And but he was like, nope, I want that guy. And it was a great collaboration and proved fruitful. I like the lack of ego there about it.
Yeah.
Well, Alan Howarth was also involved a little bit too. So you had him on top of Ennio and Carpenter. I mean, it was a lot more minimal what Howarth brought in. It was more focused on the sound effects, but he did contribute a few cues to the score as well. So I mean, all three of those guys. I mean, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that it is credited to Ennio Morricone, but Carpenter and Alan Howarth are both contributing definite cues, including because everybody's like, oh wow, it sounds so much like a Carpenter movie. It's like, yes, because it's John Carpenter doing that opening dung 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 dung.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I went to see Carpenter live years ago. I was lucky enough to get along there, and he's playing his scores. And I remember being excited to hear my favorites. And then I turned to the person beside me and was like, "Oh, he won't play The Thing because it's not his." And then he cues it up and says, "This was from a friend of mine, but it's my movie. We're playing it." And everyone was
I've seen it too live. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
Well, also, I mean, if Ennio Morricone shows up and is going to do your score, you're going to say yes I mean, I'm like, oh yes, please, Ennio, let's hear what you got. And I do want to throw back really quick, just because the 1951 film also features a great soundtrack by Dmitri Tiomkin, who would go on to win 4 Oscars over his career. Music has played a very important part in both of these films. But yeah, let's lean kind of fully into the 82 version. It is something that is a more faithful adaptation. It takes full advantage of the scenario and the isolation. It explores that sense of paranoia of not knowing who your friends or enemies are. And we've all kind of talked about how much, this film was so impactful. T.K. Carter just recently passed away, and dedicating this episode to him and all the other Thing ensemble who have gone ahead. But the ensemble itself, I think, is kind of key to this film. The ensemble and the effects, those are kind of the two things that I keep coming back to that makes this magic happen. In exception to R.J. MacReady, who are some of your favorite characters?
Boy,
I'll start with Ryan.
I don't really think there's any bad characters, to be honest with you. I think that they're all very unique and interesting. I mean, I was watching the special features and they were with all the guys that they interviewed on there, which was, I think, everybody at the time except T.K. Carter that was around. And, they talked about how they were able to do the rehearsals, and they had those couple weeks of that, and how that was so beneficial to them creating their characters, and how Tom Waits just decided that he wanted to be called Windows, and Palmer's kind of like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? But it's interesting how much of an impact that has with the glasses and just that simple those little nuancy things like that. Like, I mean, even with Dr. Copper, it's like he's got a nose ring. I mean, that's just kind of wacky and weird. I mean, granted, it's not something most of us noticed forever, but when you see it now and you watch it, it's just kind of like, what a weird choice to have something like that back then, when that was definitely not something that would be very common, you would think.
Right.
But I mean, they're all so great. I mean, Keith David, obviously, as Childs, is amazing. It's like they all just have such unique, interesting things about them, and they all get their chance to shine. They really do, even if it is more minimal in a lot of ways. Like Katie said so perfectly, they do so much with little. And I mean, to me, that's far more difficult to take the less is more approach and be effective with it than if you cram all this stuff in there and you have all this material to work with. I mean, that to me makes it easier to be able to take something so minimal and be so effective with it. To me, in my personal opinion, is monumentally far more difficult.
Katie, some of your favorite characters and maybe moments that they exhibit.
Yeah. I have a big one, and then I have a little one. But the little one is, I think the dog is one of the best actors in the entire movie. I mean, an amazing performance. And listening to the DVD commentary last night, where they're talking about they only had to do this 4 times. The dog was perfect every time. Is like, whatever. I think I am most. I mean, obviously, Wilford Brimley is terrific, and his "I'll kill you" and his shooting his gun from his hip and everything is all really great, fun stuff. Childs is terrific. Palmer and his nonsense is really, really fun. But I am very moved by Gary, who kills someone in the first 5 minutes of the movie, just sees someone shooting outside and breaks a window, and that's his response. But then later is really like, unable to step up and kind of hands things over to MacReady and recognizes the situation and goes to a really emotional place about it. That Norris was my friend. I've known him this long. But the best line in the movie by far, and I know people are going to argue that it's not, that the other one, "You got to be fucking kidding me," is the best line. But the best line in the movie by far is, "I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch." I'm not going to try to duplicate the delivery, but it is genius. It is brilliant. It comes from such a sympathetic place. You know exactly how he feels facing down the 3 guys, 2 of them with flamethrowers. It's after MacReady. I think he's my guy.
Kevin.
I tend to agree with Katie again, and I would have picked that line. It's my second favorite line in horror cinema, second to the Jeffrey Combs delivery of "Who's going to believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow." Like Moffat's delivery is so good. Like those lines are delivered so well. If you can't nail them 100%, you just say them. You can't do them. And Brimley is great. He's a lot of fun. He's helped by the I think the set designers and the production designers, I always laugh when they check in on him later and there's that little news.
Oh, that's
Right.
And he's looking so tired and fed up.
Yeah.
But he also, he's got the weight of all that knowledge on him for some time. And I can't remember who he tells MacReady to keep an eye on.
Clark.
He was with the dogs.
Yeah,
Or
and
along
then
with the dogs
I
for a
can't
long
recall
time.
if that actually pans out at that moment. It's just
No, Clark's human.
It's more.
Yeah, that's the
it's
ironic
kinda-
thing of it, is that he
it's-
was spent the most time alone with the dog, but yet he was the one that remained human.
And
Right.
it pans out in that Clark gets shot largely
That's
because
right. It
Ridley puts
ends
the
in that moment.
finger on him.
And Blair's kind of
Yeah.
stirred the pot on that. So I think his character is really central to a lot of it, even while he's off screen. And I think Brimley is so good at just going through everything that character goes through.
Well, and he's also gifted with a lot of the, such as it is, exposition. It's more supposition, where he's just kind of explaining, but he's also got the most tactile, like he's breaking the crab legs off and clearly, like you see the smell hit him. So, I mean, I think he definitely has some great showcase opportunities and he takes full advantage of them.
He looks at the scalpel. That's a great moment when he sees how small the scalpel is.
Yeah. Yeah.
He has to operate that cutting edge computer with the BBC micrographics.
I love the subgenre. Alien is a big one for this, but of like early 80s, we didn't really understand technology, and so we thought that we could just type in any old question and the computer would be like 75% chance that somebody's infected.
We take 27
hours
There now, we're almost there with ChatGPT. You just be like, yeah, sure. I'll make something up. Fraser, what favorite character and or moments?
Favorite moment of a character is I love, and this is one of my favorite lines in it. Norris's line was actually the thing, Norris, when he's like, I'm not up for taking a lead on this. It's a really fantastic little moment that is great if it's Norris, but is sort of even better knowing that it's the thing, Norris, and being like, ooh, I don't want to, that's not good for my plan to be front and center like that. So I'll just sort of beg off. But my overall favorite character, MacReady aside, is Palmer for me. I love Palmer. I think he's great. I love that. I'm always drawn to that kind of style of character, like your Hudson from Aliens, of course, being a great example, but that sort of manic, crazed one. But it is a character that is really, really easy to go sideways on. It is an actor trap to go way too like wacky and too far in there. I watched not all that long ago a movie that shares a very similar DNA to this one, which is Leviathan. And Daniel Stern is in the sort of Palmer role there. Is not good,
Right.
He's too big, he's too wacky, he's too far out there. And I think more often than not, you do go too far in that direction. I like that Palmer is doing that like manic, crazed Chariots of the Gods type thing, but still feels like an actual regular human being, not like some sort of absurd caricature. So I really like him. And then his best moment, again, I guess I'm drawn to the moments where they are the thing, but his best moment to me is that little like that he gives when he's about to get discovered. Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, it's fun while it lasted.
Yeah, that just like, here we go. Let's do this. Yeah.
But time to thing out. Chris.
It's interesting when we talk about how the ensemble nature of it, of like Blair figuring it out first, having that weight. And what did they do? They drug him up and they lock him in a shed. It's like, or that poor Swedish guy at the beginning who's like, get away from the dog. The dog is not a thing. And like Gary shoots him. Clark, all of these people carry these sins of like everybody. There's a lot of people trying to do the right thing and all of them die for it. The thing I love about Palmer is the thing, still hates Windows so much. Where were you, Windows? Like he's always like, I don't want to be alone with Windows. Windows, where were you? He's like just constantly. That's the guy that I picked out, who I'm going to try to get people to tie to a couch and flame through. It's hard not to talk about MacReady just because one of the things I noticed this last couple times is just he always has a drink in his hand. So if you think about it, on top of everything else, he is drunk the entire movie. My favorite Keith David moment, it's actually Keith David, Donald Moffat together working in tandem when his blood comes up normal after Palmer's freaked out. He's still tied back to the couch, and then he comes up normal. He's like, yeah, cut me loose. And just the look that Donald Moffat turned. Well, Keith David is like looking at him and freaking out. It's just so brilliant. Yeah. So brilliant.
Can I throw one more out there from Richard
Please.
Dysart, who hasn't been mentioned yet? When they're all arguing about who stole the blood, he's got the best head turn, I think, on film when he says, I can't remember the line, but he says something to the effect of, well, I always lock it up and then I return the key. He looks straight at Gary. Hilarious moment in an otherwise incredibly tense scene.
That's the thing, is that there are such like
there's so much room for that.
There's so much like funny little moments and stuff like that. You know, I love I really crack up at Palmer's line in the beginning when Rock is like, yeah, when he's like, yeah, I'll take you up, and he's like, no, MacReady's taking me up. And he's like, oh, thanks for thinking about it though. It's just a great comedy line, you know?
I think Fuchs has some pretty cool moments too. I mean, he seems to be the one outside of Blair that kind of is on top of things. And one of the things that's always kind of really hit me, speaking of Blair too, is the fact that like when he's right after you see him watch, where he watches the computer animation and sees what happens, is that it all of a sudden goes to him losing his mind. I mean, you do have some beats in between, but the next time you see him, he's freaking out, shooting guns, trash and everything, doing that. And it's like, where's the moment where he tries to explain to everybody?
He failed his sanity checks. Fuke made his sanity check, but Blair failed his completely.
Right, but we don't get that moment where Blair is kind of like, they're sitting there looking at him, and when he's doing the autopsy and he's, saying, well, here's imitation, here's this and that. But there's not that part really where he kind of tells people the cells are doing this. This is what's happening.
Because he can't trust them.
This point. But you
because
think that he
doesn't
would at
know
least say
who else
something.
is the thing.
Well,
he doesn't want to give anything away. I think all that happens in the moments where the camera lingers on him and he looks down and doesn't say anything. That's him recognizing that, oh, I understand what's going on here and we're all dead. And I've got to kill the dogs, and I've got to break the helicopter, and I've got to do all this stuff. Like, I think he gains nothing by telling everyone. Yeah.
That's the thing that I find interesting about Fuchs, is he's the one that actually does kind of try to talk to people, especially with pulling MacReady aside and be like, hey, this is what's happening. Here's how things are going on. And the fact that they don't quickly get to the point of, okay, nobody's going to be away from everybody. We should all stay together so we can see who's doing goofy stuff. They still be like, yeah, let's go. You go do your thing. I'll go do mine. And, every once in a while say, well, make sure you watch the other person by you. But they still keep it where it's like, well, 2 guys here or a couple here and there, so that if somebody is infected or assimilated, that puts people at risk.
What was the number of hours that you talked about?
27,000 hours.
27,000 hours.
Which I think if they ever make a sequel to this, that's what it should be called.
No.
So I hope only somebody that somebody of Cameron's thoughtfulness ever approaches that. But Fuchs and Blair represent the two distinct ways of dealing of a scientist dealing with this knowledge. Fuchs is a lot younger than Blair. He's a little more hopeful and optimistic, whereas I think Blair is just a pessimistic person who came to all the conclusions while everybody else is still figuring them out. So it does make sense to me that he doesn't share it, and that is represented, I think, in the novella, that Blair kind of very quickly gets to the he's giggling a lot maniacally because he's sort of losing his mind based on the information that they are gathering. So it makes sense to me for there to be different perspectives and to leave Blair a mystery. Just plot wise and story wise for us is that we don't know if he's not telling them because he's paranoid, or if he's not telling them because he's a thing, or if he's not, I
mean, there is that.
They leave a lot open on
when do
purpose.
we think the thing got to Blair?
I think in the
personally
shed.
think it's when he's in the shed.
Yeah.
Because when
Before
MacReady
or
goes and
after the
talks to
noose,
him,
though.
Well, when the
That's my
noose is there
question.
and he comes up to him and when he's talking to him calmly and says, I'm okay now, I'm all better.
You think
I
he's a
promise
thing
I'm not-"
there?
That definitely is. I think that's the point when he has
probably
been,
right.
he has been transformed for sure. I mean, it's arguable that maybe he was, but my thing is when he's trashing everything, the Thing would not want to do that. You would think that it would want to be found.
He's
it would want
definitely
more
human
people
there,
coming.
yeah.
He wouldn't want to do something to jeopardize the chance of it getting away from there and being able to move on to, you know, a more populated area. So that doesn't make sense that the creature would do something like that.
That reminds me of one piece from the novella that I thought was so interesting that I wish somebody had included it, but I don't want to pad out the 1982 movie with anything else.
No, of course.
But I do think the fact that the people on the radio in the novella are continuing to report normally. They have to keep reporting like everything is fine so that no one will come and rescue them.
Right.
We in the 82 movie, we immediately go to, well, this is how many days it's going to take before somebody realizes we're not reporting anymore and comes to rescue us or whatever. But I think that that's a very interesting conundrum that they have to reckon with in the novella that I missed having read it now from the movie.
Yeah, I think for Blair, that moment is when he's talking to Clark. And it's something that really landed this time around was when he's like, you mean that dog has been wandering loose for over 24 hours? That is the moment that he's like, it could literally be anybody. It could be, you know, that it is that thing of like, oh yeah, we all saw this happen, but that thing has had plenty of time. I think for Blair, that is the confirmation that he is doing the scorched earth protocols in terms of the threat that he's already perceived. All the people in the movie, aside from Palmer and Childs, who must have like the best sitcom roommate situation ever, everybody else is sort of like isolated, that it's like, oh yeah, it could go to anybody at any time and it's had 24 hours, that it is that feeling of there's literally no one I can go to. Like when Fuchs pulls MacReady alone, you know, I don't think that level of paranoia has jumped for him yet to be like, oh, I'm going to talk to somebody, because they still think Blair's overreacting rather than Blair being the person who's actually figured it all out.
Yeah.
But MacReady does make a good point when after they're burning the remains and he's standing there with everybody and he says, I know I'm human. Ben, I believe that some of you have to be, because if you were all these things, you'd just attack me and that'd be it. Right. He's like, so that means some of you are human too. And we need to figure out who it is. It's almost like MacReady shows the intelligence of, to me, what a scientist you would think he would do. Even if those people are the Thing, because if there's not enough of them that are assimilated, eventually that person would get rooted out.
In response to that though, Ryan, if I were a Thing, I would be like, I would know that who the other things were. And I would be like, okay, well, now I know MacReady is onto us, so I will wait for my opportunity to strike then. There's something from the novella that I had never considered before, and that's the telepathy aspect of it. Mm-hmm. The alien is able to get inside your brain, find out how you think about how you see the world, and then it assimilates you. Because if it just took on your shape, it would act completely foreign. But the fact that it takes the time to kind of eat your brain first and then eat your body, I thought that was a fascinating thing. And I would have loved to see Bill Lancaster, our screenwriter, throw in one line about that just something that the Blair is postulating going. But again, how could we know that? I don't know. The novella, is it him or who comes up with that idea of the telepathy or kind of diagnosis?
It's sort of seeded in very early on.
No, it's the guy who's getting the voice. He's getting the voices in his dreams.
Yeah.
They're all having
I'm
surprised.
Dreams. I'm surprised Carpenter didn't put in there, considering he waited for Prince of Darkness.
Yeah,
to do that little sequence.
Yeah.
So I think it's fascinating that it does we don't get an explanation of how it can imitate the cells of a human being and therefore understand its thought process, syntax, relationships with other people,
memories, etc.
It knows how to behave.
Yeah.
Right up until the moment that it doesn't. And then it's like, well, fuck it, changing now, but I'm glad they don't explain it, because then there's no clues, like there's no, you're watching the whole time. Like, could that guy be a thing? Was that weird that he did that? Was it weird that Norris rejected command?
I do think there's an interesting piece there. Yeah. With like what not just taking over the mind, but over the body, like how much of you is still there when you're the thing. And one of the things that I thought about a lot in this view, I mean, I've seen this movie, you know, so many times, but pretty strong chance this is the movie I've watched, the singular movie I've watched more than any other movie in my life. Probably. But one of the things I was thinking about this time was like, with that question of like how much they take over, like why does Thing Norris have a heart attack?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Because it's a perfect imitation. Norris has a bad heart.
Yeah.
He picked a loser on. They picked a lemon on that one.
Yeah. So they picked.
I think it's great because it deters you from like, surely the Thing is not going to take over.
Right.
He was about to die from a heart attack, but it did.
Because it's a perfect imitation. It is also a perfect imitation of a
failing
heart.
Of a defect, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I like that.
So we were watching it with commentary last night, and something that Kurt Russell and John Carpenter brought up was that, particularly at this moment in time, a influence on this was the AIDS was just becoming known. And when you think about that and that the blood test scene, which Carpenter says is the whole reason he was like a defining image for this movie, it is this idea that it's like, yeah, there's something in the blood. You can't see it, you don't know it, and when you find out, it's too late. I've always loved that scene, and it is the scene I think of, other than the chest opener and the Doc Hopper, it is, you know, the other big set piece of the movie that I think of the most. The fact that, and I think what makes this movie stand out so much is that it has definite ideas. I feel like the novella has definite ideas, and this movie has definite ideas. And I feel like The Hawks is a good movie that is a alien creature horror movie, and 2011 is, hey, let's paint some numbers in. So you see, you know, but I feel like this has ideas that it wants to share, and that's the kind of horror that appeals to me.
Katie, I know you have a few things that you would like to share.
I do. I have props.
Our viewers.
I rarely have props or t-shirts or anything, so I'm really excited. The first one is a blanket from, you can't read, it's all fuzzy, but there's a restaurant in New Hampshire that my dearest, oldest friend, Susan, went to that does like dinner themed movie nights, and they did The Thing, and they had this fantastic menu that I'm not going to get into here because I'll talk for 4 hours about it, but they gave everybody a blanket because it was outside in cold weather, and they got 2, so she sent me one. The next prop is the Infection at Outpost 31 board game, which Chris and I have played one time. It was very memorable. I played MacReady, and I got all the humans out on the helicopter at the end of it, which was great.
You need a certain amount of people to play it. That's why
that's the only reason we haven't played it again. We'll
be right over.
Yeah, there's flamethrowers and all sorts of fun stuff. It's a Funko Pop of the Endgame Blair.
Oh wow!
Right, and this is only because we got this. Chris got this for me for Christmas. Only because we got it did we ever realize that you can see Blair's face on the when you're facing the television, the left side of the creature, which I've never seen before because I've been distracted by the giant gaping maw and the dog coming out of his chest.
Yep.
Right, but this Funko Pop is in great detail, including the dog and the giant gaping mouth. But my prized possession is, and Chris also got this for me, when I was 12, 13, I had a subscription to Twilight Zone magazine that my dad had gotten me. And of course, when I left home, I didn't bring anything with me. And I have lamented the loss of my year's worth of Twilight Zone magazines forever. But Chris found me the one that has the reviews from movies of 1982 in it. It's basically what worked, what didn't. And it's a stark reminder of how poorly this movie was received. One of the things that doesn't work is the all too forgettable hero played by Kurt Russell, whose mixture of cynicism and heroic self-sacrifice is never very convincing. Like, what?
That's ridiculous.
They also put under both what worked and what didn't, no women. And they put the ending is also under both what worked and what didn't. They do give Carpenter credit for making a more faithful adaptation of the John W. Campbell story, which makes sense for Twilight Zone magazine, this is full of short stories by Roald Dahl and other sci-fi writers at the time.
Twilight Zone magazine is kind of a very important publication for me because it got me into a lot of genre stuff, and I have never met anybody else who has referenced Twilight Zone magazine.
My dad just was like, she seems to like the Twilight Zone. And we're from an area where Rod Serling lived. So Twilight Zone had a little bit of more more mystique around.
But oddly enough, those 3 points, MacReady and No Women and the ending, are the last 3 things we're going to be talking about. So
excellent.
Let's talk about MacReady really quick. Kevin, go ahead and tell us, some things about what makes MacReady such an awesome hero for this movie.
It's the economy of dialogue. He's a reluctant leader and he wants to then get it done though for the safety of everyone. It's helped by having the innate Kurt Russell-ness inhabiting the character as well.
Yes.
Like the casting of this ensemble is great, and I think MacReady is just really perfectly embodied in Kurt Russell. He's looking grizzled here. He's not looking as sort of cover model as he can look in some roles. I think as a person throughout the years, Kurt Russell has something about him where you do trust him, you do want to follow him for a certain while, even if he's always drinking and and even if you're worried if it might be a thing. If it might be a thing, I would maybe consider still having one last drink with Kurt Russell. Like, okay, I'm done, thing me up.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, it's kind of his flawed quality as a hero, his reluctance to be the hero. He doesn't want to step up, but he finds himself being the only one who does stand up. And so I think that's very appealing in that character, and his laconic approach to it really works. And it's funny him coming off of Escape from New York, where he's kind of doing this tongue-in-cheek Clint Eastwood impression, whereas here he's actually a masculine man doing what needs to be done, as opposed to Snake Plissken, which feels like he's having fun. He's poking at that concept of masculinity and heroism.
I love that. I totally agree. And I'll expand it to Jack Burton as well, who he'd, be later, which is, the person who thinks that he is that and ultimately proves that he is, but kind of isn't, and it is interesting that Kurt Russell doesn't bring that kind of, like I said, there are funnier moments in here. But Kurt Russell, who's usually the funny guy in a lot of these kinds of situations, does not have a tremendous amount of them. He's pretty dang serious and just sort of, bringing that gravity. I think the other thing that makes him interesting, the little moment that I really, really love from him, overall, it's that he accepts the situation, right? We talked about it earlier. There's that scene where Childs is like, well, how do they impersonate these other things? He's like, they're aliens. I don't know. It doesn't matter. No, we're not going to talk about that because it's happening and they're aliens and that's all that there is to it. So he just accepts the situation, deals with the situation that's in front of him without getting all worked up about it, which is great. But he is crafty and smarter, than sometimes I think, he gives off. And the moment that I think really shows that is when he's making his recording and he deletes that part about how we're all very tired, which I've always really loved. Of like, if this is found, I do not want people to think that we just went crazy. And so I need to make sure that they don't think that. And I've just always thought that's such a great, really, really interesting, peek into his psyche and his way of thinking about how other people are going to perceive the situation.
I find it the whole movie interesting, and as our main character, he kills Clark. Why does he kill Clark? Because Clark comes at him with a knife. It's instant. And then Clark is not a thing. At the end when he's like, the thing wants to freeze, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But if in specific moments he's like, but I will kill you if you try to kill me. Kurt Russell and John Carpenter talk a little bit about what they bandied about for his backstory, and that he was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and he lived through some things there, and he's just trying to escape the world. None of that gets voiced in the movie whatsoever. But when you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, I can definitely see that. And the scene with Childs, where he's like, they're asking him questions, like he has the answers. And it's like watching a horror movie with somebody's like, well, why is he doing that? I'm like, I have all of the same information you do. Why are you?
Hey, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Because he's different than us. That's why. I don't know. It's, but it is that kind of and once again falls into that blue collar horror that I love. It's like, yeah, I mean, yes, they are scientists, but nobody's there studying aliens. It's like
No.
we're here studying weather patterns, and there's this thing that's just dropped on our laps that now we're trying to deal with. So, and I like that aspect of him. And well, fuck you too is one of my favorite lines ever.
I mean, it's Kurt Russell being Kurt Russell, basically. I mean, which is not a bad thing at all. When he has to take action, he does. He doesn't really sit there, and he's very decisive in his actions. And I think that the Vietnam thing, you can definitely tell just kind of how he looks. I mean, his hair the way it is, and his dress and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it makes sense, being a helicopter pilot and all that maybe that's where he got his training and things like that. At least for the most part, seems to make all the right decisions and the things that should be made. I mean, he ultimately realizes that we can't let this thing out. And, even says none of us are getting out of here alive, which is interesting that he recorded that thing and then blew everything up. So I wonder, did he bury it somewhere so that it'll be preserved? If they ever did make a sequel, somebody would find it.
I'm sort of going to say what you said, Aaron, but in a different way. I very much appreciate, especially now, I don't know that I did when I first saw the movie, but I appreciate now that he's extremely vulnerable. He does not move like an action hero. He stumbles a lot. He gets blown back by flame throwing a lot. Like he's vulnerable and unsteady. There's no ego about the performance, which I really like. He doesn't have to be the guy who wins every fight or gets all the good lines or kills all the bad guys in the best ways. He's really just a person moving through the world trying to do their best and reacting appropriately. But when I think of him in this movie, I think of the scene from below with the fake hand and the thing where he's looking and he's covered in like ice. He's a survivor, and I really appreciate that. I also love it in contrast to what I read in the novella repeatedly about him being a bronze god. And I was like, I just wouldn't cast Kurt Russell in that role if I was doing that. But he takes it, he makes it his own. I think of how the look on his face after the flame throwing of the dogs and what they just witnessed. Doesn't have to say anything. It's extraordinarily vulnerable and scared, while still trying to not freak out. I like that. It's a layered performance in a movie that doesn't have a lot of time for that.
I always feel bummed out when Knowles cuts him loose. I'm like, come on, you think MacReady's the thing? Speaking of our ensemble, which is entirely male, but it feels entirely appropriate to me, at least. I think that if there were a woman or women in the cast, it would feel like it had been imposed. It feels like this is what this story is. I'm curious what other people's thoughts on that are.
I didn't really notice it for the longest time, like until I sort of became more socially aware and self-aware and things like that. And my instinct is to want to be really, really mad about it, but I'm not. It's just not about that. And I personally appreciate the laser focus on the paranoia through line of this movie. There are no distractions. Nobody's performing for anyone. Nobody's peacocking it up for anyone. It's very focused on survival. Would a woman being in it or would half of them being women change that? I don't know, but they don't have to worry about it because there's no women written into it.
I think it would change it just in terms of how they interact with each other. I think it would be different in that regard.
Wouldn't mind seeing an all-female version of it.
That's what I was just going to say. Like, I would love to see an all-female just to see.
I'm available if anybody wants
this. This feels like this is how men would behave. And I would love to see how women would behave in a similar scenario. Mm-hmm. Not to make sweeping gender generalizations, but it would be interesting.
Yeah, it's like I wouldn't want to see The Descent with a man thrown in there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it's even hard to try to put somebody in there. Like, well, who would you swap out? What would be this? What would be that? Because once again, and I know we've been saying this a lot, this movie it's a perfect movie to me. It really is. Once again, I would love to see somebody else do a take on it with those dynamics involved. But in terms of this movie is what it is.
And I agree with your take, Aaron, that it would feel sort of imposed, because I think we see that literally in the 2011 version. I think, that feels, having great actress, love her, but she definitely feels like a writer's room decision to be like, got to make sure that we have a female lead in this one.
And it's in sharp contrast to Ripley, who is, because she's female, I believe, challenged on her authority in so many ways, which doesn't come up in the 2011 movie. I mean, she is dismissed, but that is because that guy is he's dismissing everybody. It's not because she's female; it's because she has a different opinion.
Well, and that's also why he probably brought her in,
where he tells her, "Don't contradict me in front of other people." And I mean,
agreed,
that
but
is
it's not because
I think he
she's
would
a
have probably
woman,
said
it's
right.
because
He
she's
probably
a-
would have said that to anyone if it would have been a
He
male or a
definitely
female that would have made that
That's
comment.
clear already. Yeah.
I don't know if Carpenter's ever spoken on this himself, but in terms of the practicality for the filmmaking, I think I would have given him more problems. What could be shown with the body mutilation effects, the perhaps the dynamic of a scene where people have to tie one another down to sofas might seem a bit different when it's one or two women in an isolated Arctic base surrounded by men. Maybe that's why he thought, it's going to be all male here, and that will save any other complications. We've got enough paranoia and horror running throughout this. Perhaps I think it's a good decision for the story. Again, I would agree that an all-female version or interpretation of this tale would be good, but I do think it is a tale that works best with one or the other without other dynamics at play.
And since you mentioned The Descent, I mean, I feel like that is kind of a movie about distrust and alliances and not knowing whether you can count on them or not. So, I mean, we kind of do get the inverse.
Which is built on not on the situation that they are encountering, but on their past history and what they learn about each other and know about.
Well, right. Well, I mean, and one of them leads them astray.
Yes.
The leader is somebody they can't follow. They're like, well, I can't trust you now because you made the wrong decision from the get-go.
Yeah, her motives are definitely coming from a bad place.
Yeah,
we've sort of talked obliquely about it. Having seen this so many times, it's impossible to relay, much like Alien, and I think I mentioned this in our Alien conversation, that when that dog goes into that kennel and sits down and its face splits open, nothing in the movie to that point had led you to believe that anything like that was going to happen. It is literally
it goes so hard, so fast.
Yeah, it's like, oh, there's this suspense and blah, blah, blah. It is 3 seconds and all of a sudden, blah, and you're like, oh my God, that it is suddenly you are in that realm of, oh my God, literally anything could happen at this point, and you don't know. And I think this is one of the most successful movies in pulling that trick and sustaining and topping it. Like when that chest opens up and it's nothing but teeth, you didn't see that. There's nobody who saw that coming. It is completely shocking. And the head coming off the table and sprouting, everything just keeps upping and upping.
Gotta be fucking kidding me.
Yeah. And even to this day, it really hasn't been equaled or topped. I mean, it still stands all these years later as one of the preeminent effects showcasing movies. The 2011 movie is a perfect example that you can't even do it as good now as what Bottin and crew did back then.
I love the moment in Stranger Things when Mr. Clark points out that it's bubble. They're watching The Thing, he and his girlfriend, before they were about to get interrupted by Dustin. And he points out that it's bubble gum. I love the way it's permeated into so many other things that I love.
The slidey face guy is Robert Picardo.
Right, yeah.
I think he was from a mold by Stan Winston that he did for The Howling.
Right, which Picardo plays Eddie in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it gets trapped or discovered, it just basically cycles through anything it's ever been in its lifespan. That, it's got crab legs, it's got claw arms that come out and reach to the ceiling, and then you got Blair and the dog and the giant mouth that splits open. Just the amount of imagination that they brought to practical effects. Not like today where it is CGI. It's like, well, maybe we'll do this, or we'll maybe do that. It's like, no, they had, once I think of Lord of the Rings, it's like you had somebody making all of that chainmail. Here you had definite thought processes about how this would morph, because it had to be real. And I really think that attention to detail is what makes this movie so spectacular.
It's also so much more collaborative because you have to get the lighting people in it. You have to get the director of photography in on it. You all have to work together to bring that to life. It's not something that's being superimposed after the fact. It's happening in front of the actors. It's happening in front of the camera. It's got to be lit and set properly.
I've done this before, and I'm like, what the hell did win Best Makeup that year? It turns out it was Gandhi. I think the problem, the problem is that it's such a blend of makeup effects and special effects, and it was critically reviled, and it wasn't a box office hit. So all of those reasons, it didn't get seen by the Academy. And I think it is one of the great crimes that Rob Bottin did not get his Oscar for that. He would later get an Oscar. When we look at this movie, it is just a masterclass in making illusions happen in front of the lens. That's actually happening right there in front of you.
I think one of the best examples of that, of like the real like physicality of it, is that autopsy scene, right? Where like that is just the camera just show, like they had to build that thing. That thing had to be sturdy. That like, and it looks like you can really see like, oh, that's like bone. That's like skin, and to have that level of like being willing to just like let the camera really sit on it. Yep. You can only do that if you are super confident that it's going to look good, right? And they are, and justifiably so.
I mean, that's the thing. Like Rob Bottin and Dean Cundey are like, Dean Cundey's like, Rob was always not wanting me to put too much light on my effects. And Dean Cundey's like, no, we have to show this. This is incredible. So it was like this great kind of tension between those two.
Yeah.
Well, and Cundey knew just how much light to use so that it didn't give away the illusion, so that you could see what the heck was going on, but it didn't go, oh, that's an animatronic latex.
It is interesting to go back, because you can find the Siskel and Ebert where they talk about this movie. And just the sheer vitriol they both have for it is astounding. Rob Bottin's effects were so phenomenal that it viscerally turned both of them off.
It offended them.
They couldn't get past it. That's crazy to me. I mean, especially because like Ebert later on would be like, oh, that movie, he's like the one positive review of The Cell that I've ever seen. It's like, and that movie is gross and weird. And it's like, oh, so what has changed? Because they lost any sort of, because I think this is a great horror movie and that it does speak to the human condition, and just the effects were so overwhelming that it like that's all they could see, and they're like, nope, gross, can't handle it, and shut off.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what you just mentioned is that this is a film that was ahead of its time. Nobody was ready for this movie, and it has just continued to grow in reputation and estimation until it is recognized as the masterpiece that it is, and has overshadowed its original version, the 1951, which was for many, many, many years recognized as one of the perfect sci-fi movies. So, I mean, that just speaks to the quality. But yeah, I think it was so groundbreaking that people didn't know what to do with it. And we also had E.T. coming out just prior. And so
Blade Runner the same weekend.
Yeah, the aliens were very pretty in Blade Runner and very cute in E.T. So
let's talk about the ending. I'm less concerned with what you may have read or heard, but I'm curious just kind of like what your impressions are of the ending when you saw it for the first time and before you maybe dug into anybody else's thoughts about it.
It's the ending that stayed with me probably more than any other movie, just in its ambiguity. It kind of like defined me. I remember this and like To Live and Die in LA, which is not a horror movie, but another movie that has a very striking ending, that it is like you either love it or you don't. And this was me being like, oh, this is the kind of thing that I love. I love a film that makes you talk about it when it's done rather than tie everything up and send you on your way. So I don't know. I don't want to know. I don't feel the need to be like, well, okay, if you look at this and you look at that, and I don't think they wanted you to know. So, which goes along with the theme of the whole film. So I like that it is unabashedly ambiguous.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar boat to Chris. I love the ambiguity of it. I don't get hung up on who it is or what it is. I don't. It's not even just that I don't care. It's that I actively don't have interest and don't want to like watch the videos or read the things about like the theories of it, because I do find it more interesting to just think of it as this open-ended ambiguous question. The parallel for me, being the kind of the age and moviegoer that I am, was the whole what's in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction debate, which is similar, kind of like, oh, it's Vincent's soul and blah, blah. Like I don't know. It's what's in there? A light. That's what's in there. And like, I find it much more compelling to just think of it in that ambiguous way. That said, I will just say that I've always assumed that neither one was the thing because of MacReady's earlier line about, if I was the only one, you would just attack me. Same thing here. If one of them's the thing and one is not, why doesn't it just kill the other one? So I assume that they're both humans.
Maybe they're both things.
Well, they're both things then. Then they would just be like, hey, buddy, hey, thing.
Thing one, thing two.
Yeah, I think it's clearly implied, right, that they are aware when somebody else is the thing, right? If you're a thing.
Yeah. Your buddies.
I don't think anything is clearly implied in this movie.
I always assumed that a thing knew the identity of all the other things somehow.
But we don't know.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Katie.
I love the ambiguity. The only thing when I first saw it and I was really young, I had seen like bits and pieces of it before I saw the whole thing as a whole, because it would be like, oh, it's on, I will watch this, and then I would fall asleep or whatever. And so when I finally saw it, I was a little bit older, and I thought it was really brave. And I couldn't really think of other movies that I had seen like that. It was fun for me to think about the last conversation that they had with each other, that it was those two characters in particular, and what their last words to each other would be. It left me feeling haunted, like maybe they were both things and they're just up there freezing, and someday somebody's going to go there. And, it felt really like our world could be under threat.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, for me, when I first saw it as a kid, I was not a fan of the ending because at the time I was really young. And so, I wanted a happy ending. I wanted some kind of resolution. And the fact that we didn't get one bummed me out. But as I've matured and grown up and, seen the movie many times since that, I've come around to where, I mean, obviously it's a masterful, genius ending in every possible way. I mean, the fact that, you don't know, and that you're never going to know. I mean, Carpenter says he knows and he'll never tell anybody. I don't know if anybody's ever read the 2-issue Dark Horse Comics, quote unquote, sequel to the thing. That is an interesting story, and I recommend it for people that are fans of the movie, just to see one version of what may have happened after the events of the 82 film. And I mean, I think it's cool that it is Childs and MacReady that are both there at the end, because I mean, Childs kind of is in the background, but I think that he also plays a pretty significant role in a lot of things in a lot of ways as well. And it's just interesting to see how it all played out, where, he's just, well, I got lost in the storm. I mean, we don't know. I mean, what could happen? I know they've talked about the breath thing, but I've watched that, and especially when you watch it on the Blu-ray, and I think it's more just the way the lighting is and the way it's shot, or the direction of the camera, because you can see a couple of moments where you can see Child's breath. It's not as prominent and obvious as it is with Russell, but it is there.
I just took the ending as was presented. I was quite happy. They set up the developing bleakness quite early on, so it's not going to end well for people generally. So when those two are there, I just think, yeah, if they're going to sit down and have a drink together, then I reckon they may just freeze out there, not be rescued, which is a big difference compared to, I think we've all been to a number of film events where you get a trend sometimes over a few years where smaller films tend to just not really end, or there's this ambiguity and you're thinking the filmmaker didn't know where else to end the film and didn't have answers that you were left, wanting. The Thing has told the complete story. There are always questions, and the fact that it ends there is just perfect for the story being told. I love it.
It feels literary to me. It feels like it ends as a story would end, not necessarily, taking us to a conclusion, but it ends, with the story having been told.
I also appreciate about the ending is the only time Kurt Russell laughs or smiles is at the very end as the lights are slowly fading on him. He just, he gives Charles the drink and he just goes, that's a life that I want to know about. And I'm glad that I've watched this movie, but like the only time you see him even slightly amused is in that moment at the end.
Yeah. I also feel like the reason I like the ending and I like thinking that they are both human is that it says something about as long as there are two people in the world, there can never be trust. Yeah. It's just like, that's the world. That's the world we're in, where I can never entirely 100% trust you because you're not me and you're not going to be looking out for me. That's what we do as humans, is take care of ourselves and then take care of other people. But that's one of the things I just loved. And that was absolutely what resonated for me as the credits went up. I went, yep, that's it. We're just going to sit here and see what happens. Because that's what we do as humans.
Man, I never thought of it like that, man. You just wow, that's a heck of a interpretation.
And on that note, let's circle back around and talk about our final thoughts on our 3 movies for today. Just your final thoughts on what this experience has been like watching these 3 movies. Fraser, let's kick things off with you.
Yeah, I mean, I said before, the Carpenter is probably the movie I've seen the most. If you really put me to it, I'll probably call it my favorite horror movie of all time and one of my 5 favorite movies of all time. And thinking about it in the context of, it was a great experience to revisit it in the context of the other 2 movies and the story as well. So it's like these 4 different ways of all telling this sort of fundamental story. And it made me really appreciate more the Campbell novella that kicked it off, to be like, there's all these different paths that have various degrees of success, but all do come back to this central concept and this like nugget that he had that really managed to deliver just some all-time great stuff.
Awesome. Kevin.
I really enjoyed revisiting all 3 films and comparing alongside the novella. I stick with Carpenter's as a gold-plated classic. I love it. Things I forgot to mention were giving flowers to Richard Masur for his portrayal of Clark, who has essentially lost all of his friends before everyone else, because, as we said, they refer to each other by their surnames. He is the dog guy. That was his thing. I think it's a great performance. We've discussed the special effects. There's something really icky about Blair's hand going over someone's face and the fingers just wriggling at the cheeks.
Yeah,
which is probably not one of the effects that drove Rob Bottin to exhaustion, but is just as effective as any of the others. And I would just also recommend if anyone plays video games, the video game was a fun time. It has recently been, I think, remastered. Which I've not played yet. I'm rubbish at video games, but I still I played it on my PlayStation 2, and it was great. It really did feel like a decent little continuation of the story in that setting, and I would encourage people to give it a go if they haven't.
And just to show that Katie's not a thing,
or I'm about to die, one of the 2.
Ryan, final thoughts.
It was actually really fun to watch all 3 movies together like this, and I plowed through all 3. And I watched it, the 51, 11, and then the 82 movie, and I thought that was pretty cool. It was a fun journey, experiencing each different movie, and I think that obviously the culmination and the masterpiece is John Carpenter's movie. Like I said, it's in my top 4 all-time favorite horror movies, and thank you. I've been lucky enough to talk about almost all of them so far. Then the number 1 one is coming up in a few days, actually. But anyway, it's such a great movie. I mean, it never gets old. Every time I watch it, it's just one of those movies that it has lost none of its power, and just a perfect movie. I mean, it transcends that so much. I mean, it's just such a well-made movie in every possible way.
Katie.
I always want excuses to revisit this movie and anything tangential to this movie. So this was a really great experience again. Long time coming. So I was really excited. I can't believe no one has said first goddamn week of winter yet. Has anyone said that?
No, we haven't.
Okay. I'm really surprised. That's my other favorite line in the movie.
Well, that's why we scheduled it for this time. So
Yeah.
I was like, this is the perfect cold weather movie watch. So, and Chris, I wanted to say thank you because you gave us a gift of seeing this movie on the big screen when you rented out the theater in Rogers Park, Chicago.
That's awesome.
I think it was a birthday that you were
Yeah, it was for my 50th. It was technically not my 50th birthday. I had all sorts of plans for my 50th birthday, but we had a pandemic instead. So coming out of the pandemic for my 51st, I was like, well, what can I do? And I had never seen this on the big screen before. And the 400 in Rogers Park was in order to kind of generate revenue. It was like, yeah, you can rent out a theater and bring in a Blu-ray. So I brought in my Blu-ray of the thing, invited a bunch of folks to come watch it with me and experience it
That's awesome.
on the big screen for the first time. And that would have been 40 years. So it was like the 40th anniversary for John Carpenter.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that was also my introduction to finding out that you were a horror fan. I was like, oh, well, if he's going to rent out a movie theater and the first movie he's going to show is The Thing, I'm like, okay, well, we should probably hang out a little bit more.
Yeah, I will say that I have a Letterboxd account, and that is one of my 4 favorites that's listed under my profile. 2 of my 4 favorites came out the summer of '82. It's that and Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan.
Great.
Also featured in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and then the other ones are Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, but I have watched movies after 1982. They're just like, things that I appreciated about the Thing from Another World was some of the humor. Close the door. Every time somebody went into that general's office, it's like, come in. The second the door opens, close the door.
Right.
Like an hour after
Yes,
that.
it keeps coming back. This movie shaped my love of horror, and like any genre, there's good and there's bad, but it's made me explore it, and it's led to my writing some and being involved in that way, and performance of it. So it's it's a touchstone for me, and I do have to wonder that if this had not come out the week after E.T., like if this came out in October or November, or this and Blade Runner came out in October or November, would we have had to wait decades for people to have an appreciation for them, or would they have been classics? Because this doesn't feel like a summer movie. It doesn't. It doesn't have that like. And for E.T. to eat everybody's lunch that summer was just, I do wonder like if timing is what hurt this movie the worst.
Well, they did say that they didn't really do much for promoting it because it got bumped into another movies. I think they were supposed to be doing some other movie at the time, and something happened where it fell through. So then they just decided, okay, well, let's shoehorn the Thing into there. And they pretty much kind of dumped it out without a lot of fanfare and a lot of like working to build it up and promote the movie and kind of give it a chance to have legs and be successful. So, I mean, that also, on top of the E.T. thing, hurt the movie as it was coming out in the first place as well.
I remember being in line to see E.T. for probably the second or third time and seeing the poster for The Thing and going, that looks like the movie for me. And then when I watched it, I was like, that was too much movie for me. People weren't going to be taking their kids to see The Thing, or at least not everybody was going to be taking their kids to see The Thing, but everybody was taking their kids to see E.T. So again, I'm glad that we're all here now. I'm glad we're appreciating the films for what they are. And this was just an amazing conversation, as I knew it would be. So thank you all for hanging in there and doing this extra long episode with me. Looking forward to having you all on again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.